Outside the bloodline, what excites you about Cody Rhodes and his opponents? We saw him against Shinsuke Nakamura. We've seen him against AJ Styles. We've seen him against Kevin Owens, in which he hands his former friend a title shot in Nice, France. So outside the bloodline, I think that he's had good matches. But ultimately, when you are a babyface champion, you want to be in peril. You want people to root for you and say, my God, that's our champion. I hope that he can make it. It's always just been matches outside the bloodline, not necessarily he's in a brutal feud that's going to last for a while, a blood feud, kind of like we saw with McIntyre and Punk. So I just think it's just been very good as champion for him.
Yeah, I think from a business standpoint, it's been great. He's the guy that's working every town. Like he said, he's working that Cena schedule. But from an investment standpoint, I agree. I think it's a low B at this point because there's never been that moment where it's like, ooh, is this going to happen? Is Cody going to drop the title right now? Like, it's just going through the motions. It's bloodline impacted. And, like, sure, there's some matches. Logan Paul was a good match. KO was a good match. I'm intrigued moving forward, the KO and Orton stuff, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. But, like, him versus Solo in a main event every other pay-per-view just isn't doing it for me right now as a champ.
Yeah, so for me, it's a C+. And so I even drop out of the B category. And again, I don't think any of it's on Cody. Like from a business standpoint, like you said, like the dude sells merch, he cuts good promos. But in terms of me investing in this, it's always tough with a babyface champion. We've talked about this how many ever times. You can only be as strong as your challengers, right? Like that's any good like superhero movie, really any movie where you're talking about good versus evil. It's okay. So what is the obstacle that you have to overcome? And that's why movies with, truly iconic villains are the ones I think a lot of people remember. He really hasn't had to do with that. And look, I understand. Okay, you've got to have somebody like Shinsuke Nakamura early. You've got to have, AJ Styles. Okay, former WWE champion. You can put together a decent program. So with a baby face, it's just tough. Like I think of other baby faces, like the one other baby face I think of in WWE that got the big win at WrestleMania that was supposed to vault them forward. And eventually it did with Daniel Bryan Danielson, whatever you want to call him. But with him, he got hurt right away, right? Like it was always going to be tough for Bryan at that point to overcome something bigger than Triple H and the Authority that they were, that he was up against at that point. And it's the same thing with Cody Rhodes. The most interesting stuff that he has done has been with the bloodline. And I'm hoping that, okay, he helped out Roman. I'm hoping this KO stuff kind of pulls him away. I don't want him to be really involved with the bloodline civil war anymore. Granted, he's probably going to have to get sucked back in at some point when The Rock returns. But I think like the foundation of that was laid at WrestleMania last year. I think we're all looking forward to the story that can be. But there just hasn't been. And again, it's when you're talking about finishing a story that has literally been in motion for decades.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be tough to really overcome that. There hasn't been anything super compelling. I'm with you, Brian. I think that the KO stuff is the most intriguing thing for me. And I think that has a lot of potential, but they've purposefully tried to keep him away from some of the bigger, from some of the bigger heels, understandably so. And as a babyface champion, no matter what company we're talking about, no matter what era we're talking about, babyface champion taking on some mid-level heels, like that's not that compelling of a run.
Well, it's funny because we've for years talked about with Roman as champ that they didn't build up any credible baby faces. Now you have a babyface champ, and there really are no credible heels. Like you talk about keeping him away.
I think there's plenty of credible heels. I mean, you have, but they've just kind of kept him away, whether that's Drew McIntyre, whether that's Gunther, whether that's, again, now you just flipped over KO, whether, so I don't think it's like they haven't built up a credible heel problem. I think it's we have some plans down the road and we just kind of have to tread water until we get to those plans.
The heavyweight champion should be a major attraction in the company. And even what's happening right now is that the bloodline story is still number one, and Cody's not part of this. I'll say this, that we've got Survivor Series right around the corner in Vancouver, and Roman Reigns is going to need some partners. Clearly, he needs some allies. And it makes you wonder whether or not that Cody's going to align himself with Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso at some point. Who knows?